The Japanese Navy built battleships to rule the Pacific. Towering giants with armor thicker than houses and guns that could fire shells weighing as much as a car. They were supposed to be invincible, floating fortresses no plane could sink. And yet, in battle after battle, these mighty ships were shredded, not by other battleships, but by small, fragile American torpedo planes. Let's look at the brutal mathematics of why. The Japanese Navy believed in the decisive battle doctrine. Battleships like Yamato, Nagato, and Fuso were meant to annihilate the U.S. fleet in a single clash of giants. They carried guns larger than anything afloat, with crews numbering over 2,000 men each. But battleships had one fatal weakness. They were slow, blind, and vulnerable from above. Enter the Douglas TBD Devastator and later the TBF Avenger. These aircraft were tiny compared to the ships they hunted. A Devastator weighed just 10,000 pounds, fully loaded. Yamato displaced 72,000 tons, 14,000 times heavier. And yet, the Devastator carried one weapon that turned giants into targets. The Mark 13 torpedo, 2,000 pounds of explosive steel that could rip open a warship's side. Here's the shocking part. The Mark 13 had a 500-pound warhead. A single hit could flood multiple compartments, disable engines, and leave a battleship listing. Japanese ships needed dozens of watertight sections to survive. But once enough were breached, even the largest ship began to sink. A weapon the size of a telephone pole could kill something the size of a skyscraper. The Battle of Midway in June 1942 showed the imbalance. Japanese battleships and carriers were supposed to dominate. Instead, waves of American torpedo planes came in low, skimming the waves. Most were shot down, entire squadrons wiped out. But their sacrifice forced Japanese carriers to maneuver and scatter. That opened them up for dive bombers. In minutes, 3 carriers were on fire. By the end of the day, Japan lost 4. The battleships that were supposed to protect them could only watch, too slow to dodge, too blind to respond. One survivor described the American attack runs as suicidal mosquitoes. But mosquitoes carrying explosives can kill even lions. Let's talk about armor. Japanese battleships had belt armor 16 inches thick, designed to stop shells from other ships. But torpedoes didn't hit belts. They exploded underwater against the soft underbelly. At Pearl Harbor, a single torpedo ripped open USS Arizona, igniting her magazines. At Leyte Gulf, torpedoes crippled Yamato's sister ship Musashi, flooding her so badly pumps couldn't keep up. She took 19 torpedo hits and finally capsized, dragging over 1,000 men down with her. No shell could have done that. Planes barely heavier than a truck did. Here's the brutal arithmetic of fuel. A battleship burned 600 tons of oil a day at combat speed. An Avenger burned just 150 gallons per mission. One battleship required the same fuel as 10,000 planes. Japan, starved of oil, could not sustain that math. America, with endless fuel, could. Accuracy sealed the fate. A battleship's 18-inch gun could hurl a shell 25 miles, but hitting a moving ship at that range was almost impossible. Hit probabilities at long range were under 1%. Torpedo planes, by contrast, dropped from a few hundred yards. Their chances of a hit were far higher. At Leyte Gulf, American pilots attacked Japanese giants at close range, slamming home torpedo after torpedo. Musashi and Yamato both went down under the weight of tiny planes they could barely even track. Another overlooked fact: Japanese anti-aircraft fire was weak. Early in the war, battleships carried 25mm guns with low rates of fire and poor sights. Pilots called them popcorn guns. Even by 1944, Yamato carried over 150 of them. But American planes still got through. A U.S. pilot wrote, "They filled the sky with sparks, but they never hit us." The irony is inescapable. Japan spent fortunes building monsters with the largest guns ever seen. But those guns were useless against aircraft. Yamato's 18-inch shells cost $50,000 each in today's money. The torpedoes that killed her cost $1,000. In her final battle, April 7, 1945, Yamato faced 400 American planes. She took 11 torpedoes and 6 bombs before rolling over and exploding. More than 3,000 men died. The most powerful battleship in history was sunk by weapons 1/50th the cost of her own shells. The truth is clear. Battleships were designed for a kind of war that never came. Air power made them obsolete before they ever fired in anger. Tiny planes flying low and slow delivered the killing blows. Japanese sailors who served on these giants called them floating coffins. They knew every mission was suicide. The lesson of history is brutal. Power without adaptation is useless. The greatest battleships ever built died not in duels with rivals, but under swarms of small, expendable planes. Giants torn apart by mosquitoes. Hollywood rarely shows it that way, but the truth is far more shocking.